With the release of the absolutely fantastic Godzilla King of the Monsters trailer, all eyes are on the Godzilla universe, the monsterverse created by Legendary, and potentially whether we will be seeing King Kong in this film, because of course the next film is Godzilla vs. King Kong. Now, you read the title and I'm sure this is what you've come here for. How can Kong possibly defeat Godzilla? Well, I have some theories that I want to discuss and kind of push through in this video, and I would just like to say that before taking another little bit more in-depth look at this kind of topic, I was very much of the opinion that Godzilla would absolutely destroy King Kong. That was my firm belief. However, I genuinely now, after looking into it just that little bit further, do believe that Kong has a small chance, and it relates back to things which we saw in Kong Skull Island. Now, we know that Kong was said to be a teenager. We have even seen Kong's parents. He is the last of his kind, he's an adolescent, and he obviously bears a massive grudge against the Skullcrawlers who wiped out his entire species. More specifically, the big one. Now, in Kong Skull Island, spoilers for Kong Skull Island, I guess, we learn from a graveyard that Kong's parents and everyone else was killed by the Skullcrawlers. Along with Skullcrawlers, it was a mass grave. Now, we can theorize that either the Kong's species was on the island and the Skullcrawlers came out from the underground pocket, or they both came from the underground pocket to then begin competing on Skull Island for the predatory rights and the absolute dominance over the island. Now, a lot of people will instantly jump and say that Kong stands a chance because he is a teenager and he has a lot more growing to do. And then the counter argument to that has always been, yes, but his parents are not that big. Their skeletons are not that big, therefore he has reached his absolute size. However, when you take a look into it just that little bit further and you kind of consider how things may have gone between these Skullcrawlers and Kong, and again, this is just a complete theory of my own, it's not, this is just how I think that Kong may stand a chance. It could be that when the Kong species came out from their underground pocket, or they were on the island and the Skullcrawlers came out, generally speaking, the mortality rate of Kong's species was incredibly high. Meaning that they all essentially pretty much died when they were in their teenage years or later teenage years. And it could be that Kong's parents are only the size that they are, i.e. the same size as Kong, because they died when they were adolescent teenagers as well, or elderly teenagers in their later years as a teenager. So, putting this into perspective, we actually don't have any bearing on how large Kong can get. It could be that he will double in his size because of course he's only a teenager, and when we met him he stood at 104 feet tall, which was the biggest incarnation of Kong that we've ever seen. And if we take Godzilla's height into account in the Monsterverse, he is 355 feet, which is of course very, very big. But if we have a Kong which could double in his size, and then if we take into consideration the theory that he may be a genetic outlier as well, we have someone who can easily reach 208 feet, potentially just that little bit more. Even if Kong was to, say, reach 250 feet, the likelihood of him standing more of a chance against Godzilla is hugely high. Yes, we know that Godzilla has the atomic breath, and we know that Kong has fur and thus could light him up like the 4th of July. But it's also really important to note the fundamental basis of what versus movies are. These two will be meeting in Godzilla vs. King Kong. And when we have versus movies, you absolutely know that they will always team up. You know that they are not going to be the main focus of the movie, and they will always have an adversary greater than their own, which they must team up to fight against. This is the basis of essentially all versus movies. So if we have a Godzilla that is 350 feet tall, and then we have a Kong that is 250 maybe a little bit higher feet tall as well. Yes, they absolutely could go toe-to-toe for a short while, but only if the script is such that they then have to team up very, very quickly to go up against something else. And this ties into how the end of Godzilla, King of the Monsters may be setting up a future monster to come into the fray. We know that Godzilla is going to be going up against King Ghidorah. We know that Godzilla will fight Mothra and also Rodan. Now, what we don't know is the fate of King Ghidorah at the end of that film. He is the big bad. He's the biggest monster in the MonsterVerse at that point in time. So the likelihood of Godzilla killing him completely, I mean, it is very, very high because of course it's a Godzilla film. Godzilla has to be victorious, but could he come back in one way or another? Yes, potentially. And if that does happen, would Godzilla, if King Ghidorah is back and he's potentially powered up, maybe he has some human interaction that's kind of beefing him up a bit, because we do know that in Godzilla, King of the Monsters, there are eco-terrorists. We know that that is a very massive plot point in that film. So if King Ghidorah returns and he is beefed up with the eco-terrorists' help, maybe they have some genetic alterations and some radiation, etc., etc., Godzilla would need help with maybe King Kong. So just to run it down, if we're taking a look at Kong Skull Island, yes, we know that his parents had been killed by the skull crawlers, the big one in particular, but what we don't know is how old his parents were when they died. Kong being pretty much the same size and being an adolescent, he's either very, very large for his age, or the mortality rate for the Kong species was so high that his parents were killed at a very, very young age, meaning Kong can get an awful lot bigger. And I understand the argument where people just go, oh yeah, but his parents were not that big. But I don't think a lot of people considered the fact that actually the mortality rate of the Kong species could have been exceptionally high, which means King Kong has an awful lot more growing to do. And not only does he have an awful lot more growing to do, but Kong could also be a genetic outlier. And I know a lot of people will jump and go, oh, but that's too convoluted, Mr. H. It's a movie. It's a movie. We see genetic outliers in every single day life. We see them in pretty much every single species. So it's not massive stretch that Kong could be a genetic outlier where he is predisposed to growing far, far larger than even his parents could possibly have reached and the adults of his particular species. And like I say, versus matches are never straight versus matches. There's never a fundamental winner. You'll always have one person that's a little bit stronger than the other, and then they always, generally speaking, have to team up against another monster or another being of some sort, and that is highly likely to happen in King Kong versus Godzilla. It's also really, really important just to note here as well that this only works if Godzilla doesn't blast Kong with his atomic breath straight away. But we know that Godzilla doesn't do that. He never uses his atomic breath straight away. He always waits pretty much until the last minute. And because of that, again, I really do feel that this theory, this kind of guess, does actually have some credibility in how Kong could beat Godzilla, or at least Kong could stand a chance against Godzilla, should I say, before they then have to team up. But guys, this is how I believe that Kong will stand a chance at beating or potentially holding his own against Godzilla, because he has an awful lot more growing to do, but taking into account the fact that the parents couldn't have been fully matured when they died. So guys, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like and a share. Get this out there to a few more people. That does help me out quite a lot. If you're new to the channel, then please do hit that subscribe button. And if you want to see more discussion-based theory videos about future topics, then please do let me know that down below in the comment section. Guys, as always, I have been Mr. H, and I will catch you in the next video.